They had my brand new F-250 hooked to a tow truck. Two guys in knockoff uniforms trying to look official. And Karen, the HOA president, standing there with the kind of smirk that says she already wrote the victory post in her head, and she had no idea she'd picked the one neighbor who carries a badge for a living. Yeah, you read that, right? They were about to tow my truck, and the whole thing blew up because they picked on an FBI task force officer who really doesn't like being played for a fool. I moved into that neighborhood thinking it was the quiet, tasteful kind of suburban peace you see in real estate photos, trimmed hedges, people who wave but don't pry, neighbors who borrow sugar and return the cup. Turns out there's always one person who treats bylaws like they're a weapon, and in our little cul-de-sac, that person was Karen. From day one, she treated me like I'd brought a marching band into church. But the marching band was just my life. I'm on a federal task force, I work weird hours, and my take-home ride is an unmarked pickup the government issued me. To anybody else, it looked like a sweet truck. To Karen, it looked like a manifesto. She started small, a passive-aggressive note about my lawn being not within regulation, a violation for an unapproved welcome mat, the usual HOA pettiness, the kind of stuff you ignore until it's not about your mat anymore. Then she focused on my vehicle. No commercial vehicles, she said, like that solved everything. Problem was, mine wasn't commercial. One truck was a government vehicle with an exemption letter. The other was my personal dream truck, registered and insured like any civilian's. I tried to explain. I left copies of federal paperwork. I even went to a meeting with my registrations and city ordinances cleaned and underlined. I put my cards on the table, and the board squinted and voted to dismiss the issue. For a minute, I thought that was the end of it, that I could park both trucks and call it a day. But Karen doesn't do day. She does vendetta. A few weeks after the vote, I came back from a long shift at 2 in the morning and saw the damn tow lights cutting across my driveway, the F-250 hooked up an actual hook and chain, and Karen standing there like she'd just solved world hunger. Next to her were two men in security uniforms that looked like they were bought during a last-minute Halloween panic, cheap badges, duty belts that squeaked the whole cosplay. They read off a court order that had my name mangled and the word county stamped in Comic Sans, and for a second the whole scene was so absurd I almost laughed. Then I remembered the truck had my child's mowing sticker on the bumper, and the guy was trying to steal it. I walked over slow because unmarked truck and all, and asked, "What's going on?" Karen straightened and said with that same polished cruelty, "We're seizing this vehicle for repeated violations. These officers are here to ensure the process goes smoothly." One of the fake cops, a lanky kid who looked like he'd seen his first haircut 2 weeks ago, took a step forward and tried to intimidate me. "Sir, show us your compliance," he said, voice cracking like he'd swallowed a violin. This is where most people would lose their cool, call a lawyer, make a TikTok, whatever. I reached into my jacket, pulled out my credentials, and let them breathe in the moment. Federal Bureau of Investigation Task Force printed black on white. The metal badge that looks so small but carries a weight people can feel. You are interfering with a federal officer and attempting to effect an illegal seizure using impersonators. I said quiet and slow. That's a felony. The air changed like someone flipped a switch. You could see the bravado drain out of those two like water out of a bucket. And then something I hadn't banked on happened. My retired neighbor, the colonel, who'd been harassing Karen about her azalea choices for years, came barreling down his driveway with a flashlight and the kind of clipped walk that screams military. He hadn't been on my side publicly. He had the kind of gruff you expect from someone who's bored of tea parties and likes to fix things with blunt force. He saw the truck hooked up, looked at the fake badges, and said 2 words that settled the whole street. "That's imposter." Suddenly, our little drama had an ally who was part thunder, part paperwork, and he blocked the tow truck like he owned the street. You could call that a twist. The old soldier who'd made passive comments about Karen's leadership style showing up to physically prevent a theft, but the real twist came a heartbeat later when I pulled out my phone and dialed the local PD. I read them the address, told them there were impersonators on scene attempting a seizure, and asked for a supervisor. I stayed on the line calmly and told the fake cops not to move. When the patrol cars screamed into the cul-de-sac with lights washing the houses in blue, Karen's face went from smug to the color of printer paper, which, if you've ever seen someone realize they miscalculated, is a fun face. "Sergeant Miller, A cop I knew from community meetings and barbecues stepped out, took it all in, and just shook his head. The imposters folded under any real scrutiny. The photoshopped court order crumpled into confession, and the lanky kid started babbling about a security company Karen had hired extra personnel for enforcement. They were cuffed in seconds. It was less dramatic than the movies make it, but infinitely juicier. In reality, the two guys confessed on the curb, admitted they'd been paid extra to dress like cops. And the tow truck driver swore he'd been misled about what was happening. You could feel the neighborhood exhaling like someone had opened a window after a house filled with smoke. What followed was a domino effect that would make Karen wish she'd stuck to complaining about lawn height. The police report called out conspiracy, impersonation, attempted theft. All the words you only ever hear in true crime podcasts until you see them filed by your county. The security company got investigated, and here's the satisfying part, lost its license. The board called an emergency meeting, neighbors testified, and Karen was removed as president. The new HOA president. The colonel who shoved the tow truck out of my driveway, the same man who'd been quietly out there waiting for someone to cross the line into criminality. He cleaned up the bylaws like he was mowing a lawn. Vague rules, excised, weaponized clauses, rewritten, and a formal apology issued to me that looked like a legal document and read like repentance. Of course I didn't stop at apologies. I hired a lawyer and filed a civil suit, harassment, emotional distress, attempted seizure. The kind of paperwork that makes people who like to flex tiny rules discover that law is a much bigger, meaner muscle. Karen's attorney advised settlement, and when the checks cleared, the settlement covered the F-250 and then some. The new normal settled in. I can park both trucks without letters, without passive nagging, and on quiet days I wash the F-250 in my driveway and watch Karen peek through her blinds the way a cat watches a dog with a new toy afraid to look me in the eye. So what's the lesson here, the moral you didn't come for but end up thinking about as you wipe soap suds off chrome? Maybe it's this: don't weaponize rules unless you're ready to be held accountable by rules that carry consequences. Power that's petty will get eaten alive by power that's procedural. And more than that, people who feel small because they bully others are often the ones who build elaborate facades to cover up how little control they have. I learned in a very loud, very public way that justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a sergeant with a notebook, a colonel with a flashlight, and a neighbor willing to step in when someone's being a coward. There's another quieter part of the lesson that sat with me afterward: the humility of seeing how fragile civility can be. We all like to think that neighborhoods are held together by rules and polite conversation, and sometimes they are, but sometimes it takes one person to tilt the scale. And that person might be the retired colonel who mows with a precision that borders on obsessive, or the neighbor who quietly collects paperwork and shows up with facts. Community isn't just who cheers the loudest at a barbecue, it's who shows up when someone crosses a line. The ending, the bit that makes you want to clap, is the one where the bad actors get consequences and the neighborhood breathes easier. The security company lost its license, the fake cops got felony charges. Karen lost her title and her credibility, and the bylaw toolkit she used as a hammer was put away for good. That doesn't make me a gleeful vigilante. It makes me a guy who stood up and used the tools available: documentation, the law, a phone call, and yes, credentials that mattered when push came to shove. The moment the sergeant read the report and the imposters admitted it, there was a satisfaction that felt tidy and earned justice that didn't need to be gory or cinematic to feel right. But here's the kicker, and the part I want you to chew on after you hit like and scroll down to the comments. Would the same thing have happened if I weren't wearing a badge? If I were just a civilian with a sweet truck and a mean neighbor, would the community have rallied the same way? Or would the fake cops have gotten away with a theft because intimidation works better against ordinary people? That question sticks in your throat because it points at something uncomfortable: power law and who gets protection first. It's easy to say don't impersonate cops and laugh at a poorly photoshopped court order, but it's not funny when those tactics work. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever had a neighbor weaponize rules against you? Would you stand up, gather your paperwork, and call the right people? Or would you hope someone like a retired colonel lived next door? Tell me what you think. Where's the line between enforcing community standards and abusing power? Is justice served when the law trumps pettiness, or does the system itself need a closer look? If you like this one, share it. Drop your stories in the comments about HOA nightmares or people who overreach, and let me know, was Karen a bully who got what she deserved, or did the escalation go too far? I want to hear your takes, your experiences, and if you've ever watched rules be turned into weapons.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.